All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I understand that there's some things that we're feeling a little anxious about. So we thought we'd do a presentation about anxiety, a little bit about test anxiety, and talk a little bit about these SOLs coming up, which I understand is causing a little bit of anxiety, right? And then my friend Craig here is going to jump in and also talk about a little bit more about anxiety and some ways to manage anxiety, perhaps on an everyday basis, but then also kind of in the moment when we have that stimulus that might be actually causing the anxiety, which does impact performance, which we'll talk about. So thank you for being here, and we'll jump right in. So I always appreciate when a speaker gives me some highlights about...
stopping you. Do you want to say who you are?
Yeah, but I was going to do that.
Okay.
I was going to do that. I was gonna do
I'm
that.
just like, when are you going to introduce yourself?
I always appreciate when a speaker kind of gives me some highlights of what we're going to be talking about. So if I'm miserable, I know how long I have to sit still, right? So here's an overview. So general anxiety, anxiety and performance, SOLs. We'll talk about test anxiety, some causes, strategies for managing it. And then it's a little bit of application, so SOL preparation, some test-taking strategies, and some resources for you guys, okay? Now, who are we, okay? So I'm Evan Weinberger. I am the co-founder and CEO of Aluminos Academic Coaching and Tutoring. We work with students on executive function skills, so organization, time management, study skills, social skills, and certainly helping them to manage their performance, preparation, etc. So anxiety certainly falls under our umbrella. That being said, there are books that I didn't read. So my friend Craig here, who's more on the therapeutic angle, is going to talk about a little bit more in depth about anxiety and some things that in a clinical or therapeutic setting, some tips on how to stay out of this setting and when it's appropriate to come to that setting, and some tips for managing that anxiety. And I'll tell you more about that at the end and how we might be able to offer some support and some different kinds of support that are out there. So what is anxiety? Just so we're all on the same page, it's one of those terms that we all kind of know a little bit about what it is, but what are we really talking about here? And we do this about executive function skills too, another term that a lot of us have heard, but just to be on the same page about what it actually means, okay? So anxiety is a very general term here that refers to excessive apprehensiveness about real or perceived threats, typically leading to avoidance behaviors, right? And often to physical symptoms such as increased heart rate and muscle tension. So we've all experienced some level of anxiety, right? There's a researcher a while ago said there's three emotions, mad, sad, and glad, and everything else is the combination of those three. Whether I entirely agree, we'll see. But anxiety, know that it is completely normal. Having anxious feelings is normal. However, we do recognize that there is general anxiety disorder. So it can cross over to be a disorder, and Craig can talk about what that means and some of the criteria for diagnosing such a disorder. But anxious feelings are perfectly normal, okay? They're also appropriate, right? We need them. Fight or flight, it helps us to get out of dangerous situations, be aware of our safety, be aware of ourselves, our own health, mentally, physically, etc., things that might harm that. So, and it's related to performance, and it's a spectrum. So there actually is a good type of anxiety, and there is a bad type of anxiety. So I'd like to get into that. So anxiety and performance are related, okay? So a linear relationship means as one variable goes up, the other one goes up, right? But we know that the relationship between anxiety and performance is not linear, right? The more anxious you get, it's not that the better you perform, right? That doesn't work. But we know that anxiety is related somehow to performance. So how? It has what we call a curvilinear relationship. The graph looks like this bell curve, okay? And so what does that actually mean in practice? What that means is that it's difficult to perform without any anxiety. In the absence of all anxiety, it is very difficult to perform. It also means that if we are too anxious, right? If we have feelings that are too anxious, we can't perform. It inhibits performance. So what is that optimal level of anxiety in order to maximize performance? It's right at the peak of that bell curve there, okay? Now, it does look a little bit different from individual to individual, right? Some people start to respond and have negative impacts or consequences from a medium amount of anxiety. Some you know, we can feel pretty anxious and still perform. So there are individual differences, and it's important that we know each other. And our kids may feel a little bit different than we do about anxiety. Okay, these things are not like definitively genetic, right? Like I have, you know, and so it's mom and dad are different, and so kids are going to be different. So your experience, it's important, I think, to guide your children and to share some of your experiences and your relationship with anxiety, but know that their precise relationship with anxiety may be different than yours. May be different than yours. So what are we anxious about? What are we feeling anxious about right now? There might be a lot of things, but I know the SOLs are one of them, right? These standards of learning. So your counselors here, and there's lots of resources to go into more depth about all the intricacies of the SOLs. But on a high level, what are we trying to measure? We're measuring the success of students in meeting expectations for learning and achievement, okay, that are set out by who? The Virginia's Board of Education, right? They cover multiple subjects and at different levels. They take, there's slight variation there, but generally some examples: ELA, math, science, social studies. There's some writing, and so it does cover multiple subjects. It's generally delivered online, and they are computer adaptive for grades 3 through 8, which means that kids are seeing, different questions based on how they're performing through the exam, right? So you get a question wrong, you might get an easier question, or you will get an easier question, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. So your student is going to see different questions in their experience taking, say, the science component of the SOL as your student, okay? And that's okay, that's normal. These exams, it's also hard to, it's not like I got 19 out of 20 correct on an exam in class, right? Some of these are experimental questions. Some of these, if other people all miss that same question, it may have an impact on how it's graded. So, and some of them, it's designed to push you, right? If you keep answering them correct, they're gonna give you a harder and harder question. So students should not feel really anxious because they get to a point where I don't know the answer to that, right? Because that's designed that way. As you answer more questions correct, you will get a harder question, right? So the idea, the mantra is, sweetheart, do the best you can. That's it. Just show up and do the best you can. And our job is to help make sure that the water is warm for our students to be able to demonstrate what they know. Right? They've been in class all year, they've been working toward, they've done their homework, hopefully. That is the crux of the preparation, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But at this point, we gotta eat, we gotta sleep, and we'll get into these things on later slides. So, we talked about anxiety. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. Well, let's talk a little bit about the bad side, okay? So, test anxiety. What is test anxiety specifically? So it's a combination of physical symptoms and emotional reactions that, and this is where we run into issues, interfere with performance, right? And that's what we don't want. We want our kids, they've been working hard, they've been doing their homework, they've been coming to class, they've been asking questions, they've been participating, hopefully they've been visiting with their teachers, advocating for themselves, etc. They have knowledge, and we want them to be able to be in a position where they can show it, where they can demonstrate that knowledge. Right? Because that's where we run into issues. This is how we measure how kids are doing. If they can't demonstrate what they know, we don't know that they know that, right? And so it's important that they're able to demonstrate that. And the problem is test anxiety. When you start to get into test anxiety, it does interfere with performance. So I'd like to hand it over to my friend Craig here. Craig, I'll let you jump in here and introduce yourself and kind of go through some of these next slides.
I'm a friend, the friend. So, thanks, Evan. So I'm Craig James. I am founding partner of two different companies. The one I'll talk about right now today is Insight and Action Therapy. We're a private outpatient office in Ashburn, right near the old Home Goods location. They moved, so I got to come up with a new reference for people when they come looking for us. What you see on the board, that's what anxiety looks like, right? You don't have to have all of those symptoms, but as Evan was saying, there's good and there's bad. This is what the bad looks like, right? And so what I talk about with anxiety, parents ask, well, how do you know if I have it or how does my child have it? Well, simply from a clinical standpoint, what is considered clinical and what is lack of life experience? If I've never done something before, stands to reason I'm gonna be a little anxious. If I've done it repeatedly and I still have the same reactions, that might be where we're starting to talk about crossover into clinical anxiety and something that we would look at on a clinical standpoint. But again, if I've never done something, you should be anxious, a little nervous, right? Everyone in this room, at some point, you're gonna have a kid that's gonna wanna drive. They're gonna be nervous. If you're nervous yourself, have your spouse or someone else teach them how to drive. It's just much better for you. So again, looking at some of these symptoms, right? Irritability, shakes, sweats, nausea. If you stop and think about it, a lot of it does make sense in terms of what does anxiety look like, and if it's pervasive, consistent, I need to probably consider looking at a clinician or trying something different, talking to family or friends. What do other people do with anxiety disorders? Right? I'll tell you up front, my wife has it, my son has elements of it, but I've got a very different personality. And so my response is we don't have time for it. Right? I talk to him about how to push him through it, or I naturalize or normalize it. It's just very different techniques. It's not a one size fits all. But that's just some thoughts. Here it is. Evan said a lot of this. It's hard to focus, right? It becomes an issue of negative thinking and negative feelings and how I overtalk it. Something that I've actually pointed out, whether it's SOL or traditional anxiety, I'll say, what is the anxiety telling you? Right? Mom, Dad, I'm anxious. Okay, first off, Mom and Dad, don't try to fix it. Please don't. But a lot of it is, hey, okay, you're anxious. Anxious about what? Well, this, that, or a third. Okay, what does that say? What does that tell you? Because there's meaning to it. And again, some of it could be natural. Hey, that makes sense that you're anxious about that. Some of it is we need to talk through it and figure things out. So I often talk to parents about it has an impact. What do we want to do about it as a family system? The one thing I tell parents, do not fix it. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're robbing your child of the experience to figure it out on their own. Or another word I'll use is resilience. Right? If we rush in to fix it, what we're saying is you don't have the ability to take care of it, I'll do it for you. Well, at what point do I give you the chance to figure it out? The sooner the better, because you can always rely on those skills as they get older. It's interesting that fourth bullet point, trouble accessing knowledge. Now, I was in high school when a friend of mine told me this, and it actually has consistently worked. And I use it clinically for clients. Craig, I'm anxious. Eat Raisinets. What do you mean? Placebo effect. Right? I've created placebos with clients. When you're studying for the SOLs, I don't care what it is. It could be Jolly Ranchers. I usually use Raisinets. Right? Eat Raisinets. Why? It's brain food. You come up with it, people will believe it. Hey, have a Tic Tac that can help you. Whatever you come up with, actually we start to help people to believe in themselves, which means they can access the knowledge because they're calming their amygdala down. If you, from a neuroscience standpoint, the amygdala of the brain is the fight or flight region. It's the first part of the brain that grows. By nature, our brains are conflict organisms. That's where fight or flight comes from. And so when I'm anxious, the amygdala is overfiring. And it is firing really, really fast. And as a result, I can't calm down, I can't self-soothe. So if you remember back when your child was young, when they were infants, you give them a pacifier. It was a way to self-soothe. Well, Raisinets is the same thing, or whatever placebo you want to come up with, it actually does work. Now, don't give them Raisinets if they're allergic to chocolate, don't like raisins, come up with something they like. But a lot of that stuff does work. Causes. I mean, that first one is really, really big. A lot of negative self-talk. And if I've never done it before, it's reasonable. I can't do it. No, it's not you can't do it. You've never done it before. Right? So we have to reframe a lot of the talking points that people have. Lack of preparation. Now, I'm a big sports fan. I love sports. And I use the clients that I've served over the years. If they played a sport, I actually take the exact same techniques from sports and apply it to life. You go to soccer practice, why? To prepare for the game. We make practice a little bit harder so the game is easier. Preparation. So how do we prepare? We're talking about the SOLs, but we're talking about life. So when it comes to the SOLs, I usually say, what's different about this than any other test? Nothing. The SOL as your student is really not about you. It's more of an indication about how the school is conveying knowledge. But we don't over talk it, right? But we talk about how to prepare, what do we need to do? What is your routine after school every Monday through Thursday? Do you come home? Do you have a snack? Right? Do you set up and where do you do your homework? Is it at the kitchen table, the dining room table? Is it in your bedroom? We create a process of preparation because we actually, the brain needs that soothing to actually allow for performance to occur. Pressure to perform, I'm a big fan of process over outcome. If I was outcome based, I will tell you all I have failed. Because when I was in high school, I was in a magnet school for the health professions. I was supposed to be a perfusionist. The doctor that runs your blood through the machine when you have heart surgery, that's what I was supposed to become. My mom's a cardiac surgeon, so I spent a lot of time, cardiac nurse, spent a lot of time in high school in the ORs. So if it was about performance and outcomes, I failed. It's process, 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 process. And that's the thing I talk to parents about. We all want things for our children. We have an idea of who we want them to become. Along the way, it may change. And so we have to understand, who is my kid? And how do I support who they are through this whole process and through life? Right? And that's the thing that a lot of parents we work with struggle. I was sharing with Evan earlier, one of my colleagues, about 2 months ago doing clinical rounds, he made the statement, teenagers aren't our clients, parents aren't. When we work with kids, we're also working with parents. The kid's just in the room. So when we talk about performance and the idea of failure, you only fail when you stop trying. Right? I'm not saying anything to you all that you probably haven't heard. Failure is just, it's a data point. Hey, you didn't score well on this test. Okay, how do we review the test? Whether it's a math test or an SOL, what is it we did? What did we learn from the outcome? And so we're all fans of outcome. Outcome-based learning is important, but the process of what did I learn? Similar to anxiety, right? You're anxious. What's it telling you? Versus, oh my God, my kid's anxious. Let me do something about it. Well, what's the anxiety telling me? In perfectionism, I really don't understand what that means. People say, I want to be perfect. You just don't want to fail, right? Learn the process. Perfectionism means I get it all right. I usually say everyone is perfect if you accept what you do. If you accept your limitations and you address them, that's perfection to me. Because we all have limitations, right? I'm still short. Limitation. I need like 3 more inches and I'd be really, really happy. But it's the idea of process over outcome based, right? Process, process, process. The one thing that I stress all the time, what is the process we have in place to overcome, to address whatever it is? Because those skills, what I might apply today in SOL, I'm going to use at some other point in my life. Is teaching the process. The outcome will be what it's going to be. A lot of parents will say to us, what about my kid's future? What about their future? Well, their future is now. What they do today is what they did yesterday is what they will do tomorrow. Future is an outcome. Future is failure or success. I don't know. Strategies. The one thing that I love to do with people is teach them how to breathe. It's amazing that we naturally do it, but we don't really understand it when we're in the midst of these situations. Right? How do I have deep breathing? And how do I do it such that it's not disruptive to me or other people? Right? The other part, it's mindfulness techniques. If you're sitting right now in the chair, your left toe feels really funny. It just feels really funny, right? If your right heel feels uncomfortable because you did something to it yesterday, it is what it is. We don't fight it. We pay attention to what our bodies are telling us, and we just keep moving. We don't have to overfunction, overfix it, right? It's just the idea of breathing techniques are the most important thing I find. Something else, I don't know if we put that on here. Exam format familiarity. It's interesting because I usually talk with folks about what's your gut tell you when you're taking a test. And they'll teach this sometimes in middle school, I know they teach it in high school, how to take standardized tests. They're going to give you multiple options. Can you eliminate the one that's completely wrong? Eliminate it, right? Which ones look about right, and then which one makes sense? Take the gut instinct. Your gut typically is never wrong, but our head and our hearts are in constant conflict, so we overthink it and we overfeel it. So when you take tests, they give you A, B, C, or D. Which one is wrong? Okay, ignore it. Now you have 2 or 3 other options. Which of the 3 makes sense based on what you know? Write it down and keep going. There's a process of taking tests. And by the way, when your kids go to college, there's 3 things you can do to pass every class in college. Number 1, sit in the front row. Number 2, go to all office hours. Number 3, ace the first test. If you do those 3, you'll pass every college class. How to relax? Oh, it's true. Try to true. How do I teach my kid how to relax? Right? Is it breathing? There's a technique called emotionally focused therapy technique. There's tapping techniques, right? There's rubbing. This little space right here in the inside of your thumb, if you rub that, you actually self-soothe. How do I teach my child how to self-soothe in anxious situations? It could be breathing. It could be a tapping technique. What is it that my child can do that is not disruptive to them or the classroom to help them soothe? Ask them. As a clinician, I love helping people. I found that most folks have the answer to every question. They just have barriers they put up. I can't do that. Well, yes, you can. Well, if you can't do A, what is B? Positive self-talk. That actually does work. We were talking earlier about your children and having a favorite. The running joke in my family, and it's not the joke, is I'm my mom's favorite, so I can never do any wrong. It's positive self-talk. How do we teach our children, but ourselves, positive self-talk? It is powerful, because the mind will overcome a lot if I believe in myself. Visualizations and mental preparation, talk a little bit about that. How do I prepare? What do I need to do? What's the room need to look like? Either the classroom, the bedroom, the family room. How do I create an environment that's visually stimulating, that's relaxing? Right? A chaotic bedroom is likely signs of a chaotic mind. So how do we create organization, order, to allow for the brain to be calm? Turning it back over to Ms. Denton.
All right, well, that was great information. Thank you. It reminds me of before I send my kids who are showing perfectionist tendencies over to a therapeutic environment, I always ask them first, did you screw up perfectly? Right? Did you screw up perfectly? And it's a little bit of a joke, but then I tell them, listen, every relationship has conflict, right? The perfect relationship has conflict. That's important. I was like, well, the perfect student has some failures. And the idea is what you do in those moments and how you respond to those failures, and make sure that you, as part of the learning process, you learn from it and don't make the same mistakes moving forward. But imagine if you never made a mistake. That first time you made a mistake, it would break you. You're 48 years old, you make your first mistake, it would break you, right? So, anyway. So, SOL preparation, let's talk about that. So there are some things during the school year, like I alluded to before, kids have been preparing for this, right? They've already been preparing for this. And so what are things, and think about your other children, right, who next year or the year after might be going through this, because some of it might be too late for this year. I know that it's imminent, but good attendance. Make sure they go to class. They're not going to learn what they need from class if they don't go to class. Some of the subjects are cumulative, which means you have to know A before you can learn B, and you have to master B before you can get to C, right? That was some of the issues that we had during COVID. Some of those courses that are cumulative in nature, we had this really awful decision as educators, like what do, right? Do we cover new material and then kids are more lost, right? Or do we cover the old material, but then it takes away time that we need to cover the material we usually cover, right? Tough questions answered differently in different places, that's okay. But it's hard, so good attendance, you got to show up. Taking notes in class, completing homework, showing all of your work, showing the steps, that's important, actually very important. Kids get excited when they know the answer, so throughout the year they skip steps. Well, that might be okay today and tomorrow or even the next day or a week from now, but when you go to study for something that's more cumulative or you go to look at that later, you can't follow what you did anymore because you don't remember. We move on, and there's just so much our short-term memory can really process and store, right? And so it's important for so many reasons. So if you can't get the right answer over and over again, you can help your teacher help you, right? Identify where you're doing things wrong, where that step is off. This is great, this is great. Also, some teachers, not on the SOLs, but during the school year, you may get partial credit, right? Along the way too, so they might be in an even better position grade-wise going, but SOL. So make sure that they have good attendance, take notes in class, complete their homework, that they make a habit of showing their work. Because during the SOLs, and we'll talk about this in a second, you have scratch paper. And so you can follow that same process that you did to get answers in school during the school year. You can follow that still. You have scratch paper, so you can mimic that same technique. Make corrections, that's important. Throughout the year, when there are tests, assessments, quizzes, quests, whatever teachers may call them, it's important that when there are errors, don't feel embarrassed, shove it to the bottom of your backpack and never look at it again. The whole idea is that's an indicator of, hey, you may not have mastered this concept. So it's important to go and correct that. Some teachers may urge students or incentivize students by saying you'll get some of your points back if you do it, and some don't. Either way, kids need to be doing corrections. If they're not incentivized at school inherently, maybe incentivize them at home as parents, right? You do the corrections, you show them to me, then you get to pick where we have dinner Saturday night, or you get an extra hour of iPad time, or whatever it might be. Incentivize them in a way that's meaningful to them, right? To do those corrections, so critical. Asking for help is needed, or self-advocating, right? When students come home and they're frustrated, they had a tough week, they didn't learn something, or they didn't master a concept, they're upset about a grade, it's important that not only do they do those corrections, that they go visit with the teacher in order to clarify that concept, advocate for themselves, stop the teacher in class and say, oh, I missed that in my notes, or can you repeat that? I think I missed the last sentence of that, right? So encourage your kids to advocate for themselves throughout the year. These are all things throughout the year, okay? And then take practice tests on the DOE website, Department of Education website. There are practice tests. They can take practice tests to become more and more familiar with the format, and so they're not, in addition to whatever feelings they may have on that day, they're also not adjusting to seeing these questions and the kinds of questions format for the first time. So encourage them to take that practice. So that's all during the school year, right? So what can you do the day of the actual SOL test to, as parents, what can you do to encourage your students to put them in that mindset to, for their peak performance, right? To be able to demonstrate what they know and what they've mastered for their own benefit and the benefit of the school, right? So eat normally. The key is don't do things different, right? Eat normally, follow your routine. We don't know how we're going to respond if we feed the machine something different. What comes out of the machine may also be different. So you want to make sure that you remain consistent, right? 8 hours of sleep. Kids should be getting at least 8 hours of sleep at this age, preferably 9, right? Dress comfortably, right? You don't need that thing that's scratching your side that's bugging you throughout the whole test, right? Arrive early. You never know, there could be traffic, there could be a car wreck, and rushing, things like rushing to school or trying to, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss the start of this first SOL. Even if you don't, just that experience can take up some of that brain space that you needed for the SOL exam and could interfere with demonstrating what you know. So leave a little early. That's the only thing out of your normal routine. Leave a few minutes earlier, right? And then deep breaths. That could be calming in addition to the wonderful tips that Craig gave us, rubbing this area of your hand, et cetera. But breathing, taking deep breaths can also really help to calm. Okay. So, test-taking strategies for the SOL exam. All right, and by the way, you can find a lot of these online, and I have some resources on one of these slides coming up. Read the instructions carefully. Even better, practice beforehand, right? Because then you know what the instructions are. But even for good measure, on the exam, make sure that you encourage your students to read the instructions carefully. Look for cue words, right? They're not evil words. They're not trying to really throw you off track, right? But part of being a good student, a successful adult, is being mindful of the details, right? So look for cue words like not, or except, or most, or best, or least, and the implications that may have on what the potential answer is to a question. Use your scratch paper and TestNav tools. So if you see, I don't know how many of you as parents are familiar with the exam, but TestNav has some tools there, and the kids will have scratch paper during certain parts of the exam. Use that scratch paper, use those tools. Those tools can be used to circle or underline or make markations, right? Cross out answer choices, et cetera. And use your scratch paper when you're working things like out math problems and mimic what you did for your homework in class. It's always best when taking multiple choice type of exams to predict the answer before you look for it in your answer choices, okay? Over and over again, that has the best results. So work a problem, let's say a math problem, you'll work the problem, you'll get the answer, then you look for that exact answer in the answer choice, pick it, and move on if it's there. If not, it's likely you did something wrong, and then they need to go back and check their work, start eliminating the answer choices that they know are incorrect, and then maximize their chances for guessing the right answer, right? Which, guessing, that's a loose term. It's not really unfairly guessing, right? If a student has said, I know this isn't the answer, I know this isn't the answer, it must be one of these two, and they guess between, I don't know that that's truly guessing, right? Like, that's a smart way of test taking, right? Narrow down your answer choices. Good. Don't spend too much time on one question. This can potentially be a big problem, right? Remind your students that, if you have a high-performing student that rarely gets things wrong on assessments, tell them you will get things wrong. You will have, because it's an adaptive test. So the more you get right, they will throw harder questions at you until you miss one. So you will miss questions on this exam. You will hit a question that you don't know how to do, and that is 100% okay. That's designed that way. It's designed that way. So make sure that they go into the test understanding it and not spend too much time. It's not this personal challenge. I need to spend all of my time on this one question that's really, really hard. No, you earned the right to have that hard question, and it's 3 grade levels above, right? You're not intended to be able to answer it. It's okay. Resources for test prep. So Virginia's Department of Education website, the DOE website, has practice tests of all these different types of tests, the different subjects, right? There's practice. Edulastic, IXL, and then tutoring services, right? Whether it's us or someone else, there are resources out there that can help with clarifying concepts, fundamentals, things that students may be a little bit looser on certain concepts, right? We can certainly help to reinforce those. So these are some great resources, but again, there's a lot online, and they're completely free. So I would encourage you to explore those. Talk to your school and your school counselor. They can direct you likely to some other resources, but there is nothing better than actually taking a practice test, right? That will have the same instructions, be formatted the same way. You're just going to have kind of different numbers, or the stories are going to be about different things, right? But that is wonderful, wonderful practice. But if you are concerned that kids are lacking some of the key fundamental concepts that they're going to need, there are resources through the school, some that I've given you here, and certainly academic support service companies like us. Okay. So to recap, We talked about anxiety and how it's not all bad, right? We need it, it's normal, and it's not all bad. Okay? We talked about its relationship with performance, and that we do need some anxiety in order to be able to perform optimally. And we talked about how that looks different on it from individual to individual. Even between our two kids, they can be completely different. Okay? We talked about test anxiety and how it can interfere with performance and being able to access information that we need, et cetera. And we talked about the SOL exams and some resources, et cetera. So, as promised, I want to kind of tell you just a minute or two about us. Everybody has a lens that they see through, right? And so, Craig described as a therapist, kind of his lens, and our lens. I'm an academic support specialist, right? So my lens is I believe that executive function is absolutely critical. Organization, time management, study. I think the power is in the process. Craig mentioned that too. The power is in the process. It's not the outcome, right? The process of school. Kids tell us all the time, why do I need this? Why do I need that? Like, am I ever gonna? No, you may never need that again, right? You learn about the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire. It's possible nobody will ever ask you about that again, right? But it's the process that you went through that was so powerful. The process of taking a topic that you know nothing about, building the skills around researching that topic, taking notes about that topic, outlining like a paper, writing about it. Think of all the skills that are being practiced there. Managing deadlines, kind of juggling those incremental deadlines. The power of school is in the process. And the subject. I won't walk away saying Evan doesn't say that the subjects don't matter. They absolutely do. But the process that we go through across all of our subjects is what's going to help us to be successful adults later. And some of the subject stuff that we learned along the way, right? So that is my lens. We work one-on-one with students, virtually and in person, on executive function skills, as well as traditional tutoring in all subjects, K through 12, early college, standardized test prep, et cetera. So this certainly is in our wheelhouse, falls under our umbrella, and my goal today was for everybody here to walk away with, even if it's just 2 or 3 tips, things that you can do. We can empower you as parents to help your children be able to demonstrate what they know on this exam. So I hope we've done that. And if it's all right, Craig, if you could come up and answer any questions from the audience here with us, that would be awesome.
You can sit there.
It's a lot of work.
Any questions?
Well, you mentioned a tapping strategy. What is that? I'm not familiar with tapping.
Emotional freedom technique. It is, I don't remember the origins of it, apologize. But it's actually a self-soothing technique. Again, it's rubbing here. There's another technique where you actually tap here and it refocuses your attention it refocuses the anxiety from what it was and it brings the attention back to the present. Emotional freedom technique, that's it, EFT, yes.
I also heard of one of using these 3 fingers here.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ones, yeah.
So I guess I could just Google that.
Yeah, I think the overarching concept is we can get lost in our heads about things, right? We're worrying about several things at the same time. And all these techniques help to recenter us and say, okay, what is at hand? What is right in front of us, right? What needs our attention right now? And this is the only thing that needs our attention. So, and I think these are some wonderful
It works, and I do a lot of work with athletes, and one of the things I do with them is, I'll talk, hey listen, something bad's gonna happen. What do you do? Right? If goalie, somebody's gonna score, my son plays lacrosse, somebody's gonna beat you, what do? You go back to basics. And so a lot of this is getting right back to the basics. What is it I know? What do I trust? Right? Go back to the basics and then go from there.
Okay. Other questions? Good? Okay, wonderful. Well, listen, the nicest thing that you can ever give somebody, 2 things, time and attention. Today you guys gave us both, so thank you. Thank you for coming, thank you for being here. It's our pleasure.
Thank you.